Good day, Prof. Ortega. We are Group 3 from BSc English 214. And today we will be presenting our curriculum plan for English 7 Quarter 1. We are excited to walk you through the thinking and the heart behind what we have designed and to present a plan that is both thoughtful and meaningful. Our curriculum plan covers English 7 Quarter 1 and it is anchored on the theme Exploring Poetry Through Language, Culture, and Identity. This theme was intentional. We wanted our grade 7 learners who are just transitioning from the story-based curriculum of grades 5 and 6 to encounter poetry not as something distant or intimidating, but as something deeply personal. Poetry, we believe, is one of the most powerful ways for young Filipinos to express who they are.
Our content standard asks learners to demonstrate multiliteracies and communicative competence in evaluating Philippine literature, specifically poetry, for clarity of meaning, purpose, and audience. The performance standard goes further. Learners must not only analyze poems, but also compose and publish their own original multimodal literary text that reflects their local and national identity. In concrete terms, by the end of this quarter, students should be able to analyze poems as expression of individual and communal values, understand the forms, elements, and devices that make poetry work, choose the right type of poetry for the right purpose, and finally, create and share their own poem with pride. These goals were carefully scaffolded across 8 lessons spanning for 40 days.
Our scope and sequence follows a spiral and scaffolded progression, from recognition to production and from the self to the community. We begin with Lesson 1, Description and Imagery, because before students can analyze a poem, they need to feel it, and imagery is the most accessible entry point. Students can immediately connect sensory language to their own experiences even before they know what a metaphor is. In Lesson 2, Basic Elements of Poetry, we build the vocabulary students need: form, line, stanza, sound devices, figurative language, and theme, using Philippine poems like La Juventud Filipina by Dr. Jose Rizal. This grounds their learning in their own literary heritage. Lesson 3 deepens linguistic competence through context clues and affixes, helping students become independent readers. Understanding an author's background is also introduced here, preparing learners for deeper literary analysis. Lesson 4, Literary Devices, is where students move from identification to interpretation. They start asking why a device is used and what effect it creates.
By Lesson 5, they are ready to look at elements of poetry as a whole system, and in Lesson 5.1 and 5.2, they learn the types of poetry and the author's purpose, because in the following lessons, they too must know what kind of poem they want to make and why. Lesson 6 sharpens their understanding of the features of dramatic, lyric, and narrative poetry, giving them the structural tools they need to compose. Lesson 7 brings everything together through analysis and peer review, where students analyze Filipino poems, reflect on communal values, draft their own poem, give and receive feedback, and revise. And finally, Lesson 8, Publishing Literary Texts, is the culmination, where students produce and share their multimodal poem. This arrangement mirrors the writing process. You observe, you learn the craft, you practice, you draft, you revise, and then you publish. This is the logic of our sequence.
To give you a clearer picture of how our lessons work in practice, we'd like to walk you through Lesson 7, Analyze Literary Texts, which we believe best demonstrate the alignment between our objectives, activities, and assessments. This lesson has 3 learning objectives. First, students identify structural elements of a poem through rhythm, meter, imagery, and explain how these convey Filipino communal values. Second, students actively practice respectful peer feedback. And third,
Students revise their draft by applying cohesive devices and correcting structural problems. These objectives are directly mapped to the two competencies. EN7 LIT 11 on analyzing literary text as expression of values, and EN7 LIT 15 on revising for coherence and cohesion.
Now let's talk about how these objectives are achieved through the activities. Activity 1 has students work in group, each assigned a canonical Filipino poem like the Molave, Man of Earth, or the Marigold, and they map out the structural elements, and then connect them to a Filipino communal value like bayanihan or family. This directly addresses the first objective. Activity 2, each student asked to draft their own poems, then exchange it with a partner for a peer review. This is where the second objective is assessed. Students must give constructive criticism or respectful feedback, reflecting the integration with values education. And activity 3 is the revision, in which students take their partner's feedback and write a final, polished draft that fulfills this third objective. The assessment mirrors these perfectly. Assessment 1 asks targeted analytical questions about structure and communal values, with text evidence required. Assessment 2 uses a structural peer review log. Students evaluate their partner's poem for a Filipino values and structural flow. This is not just formality. It is a feedback tool that powers Activity 3. The alignment here is very tight. Every objective has an activity that builds it, an assessment that measures it. This is a kind of backward design lesson we aim to build across all 8 lessons.
Now, let's move on to our major performance task, the Poetry Scrapbook Portfolio, My Journey in Words. Students create a scrapbook-style portfolio using a long white folder. The portfolio includes a creative cover page, an About Me page, compiled quarter outputs, poem analysis pages, an art page expressing a poem's feeling, the student's best original poem, a written reflection, and a closing page. Now, why is this an authentic assessment of our performance standard? Our performance standard asks students to analyze, evaluate, and compose an original multimodal literary text that reflects their local and national identity. The scrapbook portfolio does exactly this. Students analyze poems they've studied, they evaluate them for meaning and purpose, and they compose and present their own poem, paired with visual art. The use of recycled materials and drawings also gives it a multimodal dimension that no traditional paper and pencil test can replicate. More importantly, it reflects the student's identity. The cover, the About Me page, the reflection, these are genuinely the students. It gives even struggling learners a chance to show competence in ways that go beyond writing. It's also equitable. No expensive materials are required. Students can use what they have at home.
One of the most important questions in curriculum design is, who is this for? Our plan was designed with real grade 7 Filipino students in mind, and we integrated differentiation and contextualization throughout. Let me give you specific examples. In Lesson 1, students are asked to analyze a picture before reading a poem. This is a visual scaffolding strategy that supports learners who may find text-heavy tasks difficult to enter. In the same lesson, the final activities ask students to compose an 8-line poem paired with an art panel. This accommodates learners who express meaning better through images. In Lesson 5, a cooperative learning structure is built in. Groups create poems collaboratively in the chain poem activity. Ensures that every student contributes at least one line, regardless of language proficiency. For contextualization, we deliberately selected poems and authors that reflect Filipino and Southeast Asian experience. We use La Aventura Filipina and Sa Aking Mga Kabata by Rizal, like the Molave by Julieta da Costa, and even the OPM song Kanlungan by Noel Cabangon in Lesson 6. The curriculum doesn't just teach about culture. It asks students to live inside their culture and write from it.
Our curriculum does not exist in isolation. We integrated it meaningfully with other subject areas. We connected to Filipino through critical reading and visual text analysis. to values education through peer review, collaborative work, and reflection on communal values, to music and arts through analyzing Southeast Asian performing arts and creative multimodal outputs, and to EPPTLE in Lesson 8, where students use word processors and presentation tools to format and finalize their poems digitally. These integrations are not decorative additions. They reinforce each other. A student who analyzes kanlungan in English is also deepening their understanding in music and arts. A student who formats their poems digitally is building EPPTLE competencies at the same time.
Now, let me briefly situate our Grade 7 Quarter 1 curriculum within the broader spiral progression. In Grade 5, students encounter short stories and learn to recognize story elements, sound devices, and sentence construction. In Grade 6, they deepen this through literary and informational text, paragraph writing with evidence, and propaganda analysis. Our Grade 7 plan builds on this by shifting from comprehension to analysis and production. Students now compose and publish their first original literary work. And in Grade 8, this grows even further. Students analyze Afro-Asian literature through structural, biographical, historical, and sociocultural lenses, and go through a full writing process from free-writing to publishing. The progression is deliberate, from reading to analyzing to creating to refining. Each grade level adds a new layer without losing what came before.
What we hope you take away from our plan is not just list of lessons, but a philosophy. That poetry is not a subject to be endured. It is a language to be lived. We designed this curriculum so that a grade 7 student from any background can find themselves in these poems, and eventually find the courage to write their own. We believe that every child has a poem inside them, and this curriculum gives them the tools, the space, and the permission to let it out. This has been Group 3. Thank you and have a good day.